seen a brogue so soft and sweet in the rise in the world he carried the hunt. Tim had a sort of a tippling way, but the love of the liquor now he was born. Help him on with his work each day, the drum of the creature every morn. Whack for the Dano, dance to your partner with the floor, your trotters shake. Wasn't it the truth they told you? Lots of fun that betting its way. One morning Tim felt rather full, his head felt heavy which made him shake. Fell from a ladder and he burst his skull, so they carried him home, his corpse to wake. Rolled him up in a nice clean sheet, laid him out upon the bed. A gallon of whiskey at his feet, a barrel of porter at his head. Whack for the Dano, dance to your partner with the floor, your trotters shake. Wasn't it the truth they told you? Lots of fun that betting its way. His friends assembled at the wake, and Mrs. Finnegan called for lunch. First they brung in tea and cake and pipes, tobacco and whiskey punch. Biddy O'Brien began to cry. Such a nice clean corpse did you ever see? Tim of Ornan, why did you die? I shoot your guts, says Paddy McGee. Whack for the Dano, dance to your partner with the floor, your trotters shake. Wasn't it the truth they told you? Lots of fun and betting its way. Peggy O'Connor took up the job, and Biddy says she, you're wrong, I'm sure. Biddy gave her a belt in the gob and left her sprawling on the floor. Then the war did soon enrage, woman to woman and man to man. Shillelagh law was all the rage, and a row and a ruction soon began. Biggie Maloney lowered his head, and a bottle of whiskey flew at him. Missed and fallen on the bed, the liquor scattered over Tim. Tim revives, see how he rises. Timothy rising from the bed. Send water in your liquor a rum like blazes, thunder and cheese, do you think I'm dead? Whack for the Dano, dance to your partner with the floor, your trotters shake. Wasn't it the truth they told you? Lots of fun that betting its way.
Thank you very much.
Well, in a neat little town they call Belfast, apprentice to trade I was bound. Many an hour sweet happiness have I spent in that neat little town. A sad misfortune came over me, which caused me to stray from the land. Far away from my friends and relations, betrayed by the black velvet band. That's happy now. thing that I said was access to the black velvet band. Her eyes, they shone like diamonds. I thought her the queen of the land. And her hair hung over her shoulder, tied up with a black velvet band. Before the judge and the jury, next morning I had to appear. The judge, he says to me, young man, your case it is proven clear. We'll give you 7 years penal servitude to be spent far away from the land, far away from your friends and companions, betrayed by the black velvet band. Everybody, her eyes, they shone like diamonds. I thought her the queen of the land. And her hair hung over her shoulder, tied up with a black velvet band. Thank you.
All that the grasses grow and the waters flow in a free and easy way. But give me enough of the rare old stuff that's made near Galway Bay. Come gougers all from Donegal, Sligo and Leitrim too. And we'll give them the slip and we'll take a sip of the rail of Mountain Dew.
Probably new to
Hello, welcome to March Brewer Guild's meeting. It is March and it's warmer than last month, which is awesome. If you are drinking anything, please let us know in the comments. We would love to know what you are sharing. I currently have some homemade wine from Tara. It's awesome. We will continue having virtual meetings and coffee hours, at least until June or July, when we have an update as to the health department restrictions on meetings. Next slide. Here are the upcoming events. Yeah, we are going to do a virtual Mayfest. So if you are brewing, join us on Zoom. We will create a Zoom event with a link here shortly that you can see and join on Mayfest, which is May 1st. Parkville is in October this year, as is Brewfest. And the holiday party is its normal time frame of the first Saturday of the month. Speaking of Brewfest, we'd like to get that started, organized as soon as possible. Ideally, we would have 2 committee co-heads this year, one person who is experienced and one person who is new, so that we can pass that knowledge on to the next generation per se. And we can create a forum for that so people can start signing up for stuff. Steve says that he is drinking Nordic Jam from Brew Pitchers. That sounds fun. So next up is the beer competition. We definitely want to have the beer competitions. The date has yet to be determined, but we'll figure that out. Here is the list of approved styles that we discussed last year. Since we didn't get to have it last year, I figured we could just continue with that list and maybe make some few tweaks as needed. If you have any ideas about the specialty category, post some information in the comments about that, and we can either use last year's theme since we didn't get to use it, or we can come up with a new one that is post-pandemic celebratory. Next slide. For the tasting venue, that is already covered. We get to have it at Masali's. That is still tentative, but I'm sure it'll be fine. And then we need organizers to recruit and organize the stewards and judges and collect beer and organize the prizes. Next slide. The next other thing that I think would be really cool for our club to do would be an inter-guild equipment share network. A lot of people who brew on a even semi-regular basis have extra equipment or equipment that they don't use all the time that would potentially be available for others who are short on something. I know there's been several times where I need an extra carboy, and lovely people in the guild have been willing to lend me their carboy to use for a couple weeks. So if you have some extra equipment and are willing to lend it to other people, I think that would be a great interchange for our club. You can meet new and different members. It would also be super useful for newer members who maybe don't quite have everything that they need quite yet and would like to give like a test run home brewing something without having to put out all of that equipment cost upfront by themselves. And it is completely voluntary. If you would like to be put on the list to be contacted by someone who needs equipment, email Lynette Good at Gmail right there. And we will create a spreadsheet that will get posted on the forums for you to look at to see who has what and how to get a hold of them. And now it is Jake's turn.
Thanks, Lynette. I really like that equipment sharing idea, and I think I'll be donating some stuff for that cause. That's
Cool.
it's an excellent thought. Before I get into some of the membership stuff, I did want to mention that I added some water data from the Lawrence Water Department on the forums. We got data over the winter from both the Caw and Clinton tap. Interesting, maybe trend. It's not really a trend yet until maybe this year we confirm it. But it looks like the sulfate drops out on the Caw tap over the summer. So otherwise, it looks pretty consistent. So it's an interesting thing so far. So Frank hit me on the next slide. The membership, member discounts have changed. We've got some great new ones. So Service has been kind enough to give us a $2 discount off our first pour, which is fantastic. Transport Brewing, 15%. We also added, most folks were getting the 10% discount from Homebrew Pro Shop before, but we added Lawrence Brew Supply is getting 10%. And we confirmed with Bacchus and Barleycorn, they're also doing 10%. And I talked to Praxair earlier this year. they're doing 10%, and Cotton's went from 10% to 5%. So that just a heads up there. And if for some reason you're watching right now and you're on the fence whether to join or not, just think for a second. You could save, you could pay back your membership just going to service once a month. You could pay for your membership brewing like 6 to 5, if you're a hophead, probably 5 batches in a year. You'll save that. You'll get that money back from the homebrew shop, which you should be supporting your local homebrew shop. So that said, support the guild. As always, PayPal is the best way to go. Okay, so we'll get into the financials now. So as far as February goes, we had no expense, and it was all membership dues. And we're sitting pretty well. We're still doing well. We're not paying rent, so it's going pretty well. We're going to have some tastings to pay for that we haven't paid for yet. So that'll turn around a little bit, probably starting this month, maybe next month as well. But that's a good thing. We want those tastings, I think it's totally worthwhile. Going to have another homebrew tasting. I think that's going to be exciting. I'll be in on that one. And so as far as you can hit me on the next slide. So just looking at, I think you can actually see 2019 a little bit better this month. But looking at where we're falling compared to last year, it's similar. We're holding steady, like I said, but we netted 182 for the month, a little over. And that's really it for the financials.
Cool. Thank you, Jake. And we are moving to Tara for the library report.
So there's not much new for the library. We have moved all the books to my house, and my goal for the next 30 days is to get a list out of all the books we have, so you can borrow them. Either we can drop them off at your house, or you can pick them up on my porch. I have a covered porch. I would have done it this month, but I had a bit of a computer crash at my second job, which most of you know of. So I had to get a new computer, and things have been a little tough. So hopefully I'll be able to concentrate on the books and getting them online so people can see all the books we have and what the options are for borrowing books. You have to be a member, of course, and you can, with hand sanitizer and a mask, you can come look through the library by contacting me, and I hope to get a list of all of our library books online soon. Let me know if you have any questions. That's it.
Hey, Jake. Thank you, Tara. Hey, Jake. Steve Fritz asked a question on whether new memberships cards will be issued. So, should I answer that, or do you want to answer that?
He seems to have stepped away.
He has disappeared. Okay. So we are going to issue new membership cards this year. They are going to be via email. You will have the ability to print them. And we're going to give that a try because COVID is making distribution a little more complicated than it usually is. And if you want a physical card, we may get that sorted on a later date, like halfway through the year, once we know what is going to be happening for physical in-person meetings and Brewfest and stuff. So we will have that all figured out before Brewfest. But at the moment, they will be email. And we are going to stuff that is new on the forums. There is info about the spring brew for, I assume that is the homebrew tasting thing. So hopefully you have gotten some stuff ready for that. And then obviously Mayfest is going to be happening. And then we have Josh with our seminar today.
Thanks, Lynette. So we're going to talk tonight about building a kegerator or a keezer. We're not going to dive into everything you need to know about it. We don't really have time to cover some of the stuff like adjusting your regulator, balancing your lines, the different faucets and shanks that you can get. But we will go into what you need and the steps that you can take to build a kegerator or a keezer. I think that there's a ton of good information on draft systems in general. And if there's interest to do more talks and go a little deeper into those aspects, let us know on Facebook or on the forum. We might do a series of, the whole draft system. I think, just balancing lines can take, most of a seminar. So there's a lot of content there. But we'll at least cover a good overview of what you need to build a few different kinds of kegerators. So next slide. So there's three main types of kegerators, or at least three main types of kegerators you can kind of build yourself. And the first one I'll talk about is the what I call the mini kegerator, which is converted from a common mini fridge. It's one of the benefits of the mini kegerator is its small form factor. So if you're wanting to get into kegging, but you want to keep it kind of small in a living room or something like that, I think the mini fridges are the best way to go with that. They're pretty cheap to build, and they're really kind of an easy way to get into kegging, to get started with a kegerator. So, and then the next one that we'll talk about is the full-size upright kegerator, and those are just converted from a regular fridge. Generally you'll see the combos where it's a fridge and a freezer unit, and I think, in my opinion, it's probably one of the easiest of all the builds to make, and probably the cheapest, because you can find kind of an abundance of them on Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist. But they do take up a little bit of vertical space, so they're a little, take a little more space than like the mini fridge would. But one bonus is that you can store your hops or steaks or whatever you want in the freezer section if it works. And then the other kegerator that we'll discuss tonight is the chest freezer conversion, and it can actually hold more kegs than the other options, and that's really just because you can get chest freezers in a number of different sizes, all the way up to like 26 cubic foot or something like that, or maybe larger. I would say that they probably take a little bit more work than the others, and the reason for that really is because of the wooden collar. You have to, in most cases, you'll want to build a wooden collar for housing the faucets, but as well as if you want to have more kegs in your chest freezer, like on the hump or something like that, you'll want to build a collar and to accommodate that. But they do come with more space for anything you want to put in there. So secondary regulators, circulation fans, moisture control like dehumidifiers, or just more beer bottles, kegs and stuff. You just have a lot more options with a chest freezer than you do in the other two builds. But they can also be the most expensive, and that's usually because of the amount of space and the size that you can get, but also because of that additional size, you're going to be doing probably more kegs and more faucets, and so those things can add up. Next slide. So we'll go and get started on the build section of it, and I'm going to just go over my recent build that I did for my brother-in-law Tim for Christmas of a mini fridge conversion. And the first thing you want to do is get the fridge, right? So ideally you want a cheap fridge because there's going to be some things you do to it that you could break it. But if you've got one laying around or you're looking for one, there's Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist. You can get them, I think, anywhere from $30 up to about $60 and higher, depending on the model you're looking for. But I would recommend going with at least a 4 cubic foot mini fridge. You can get away with maybe like a 3.5 cubic foot, but I don't think you could probably go a lot smaller than that. just because you're gonna lose the ability to fit kegs inside of it. Um, uh, what I did, and I think is a good way to do it if you've got time, you're not in a hurry to get the mini fridge, is I actually went to homebrewtalk.com. In their forums, they have a lot of builds that people have already done. So they've converted fridges already. They've written up kind of their process. And so I would look on Facebook Marketplace, see the model of the fridge, compare it to those that have already been built, to make sure, if I drill in the top, I'm not going to run into a refrigerant line or something like that. And so that's a benefit for you if you have the time and you can wait to get a fridge. Knowing that piece of it, I think, makes it a little bit easier to build. And then also, if you do have the ability before you purchase it, which maybe it's common sense, but just make sure it gets cold. You don't want to go through all the work of drilling through it and doing the modifications and then not being able to actually chill the beer in there. And one bonus tip I will give you is if you do not want to do the one real nerve-wracking part of the build, which is to bend the freezer plate down 90 degrees, look for a beverage fridge. Beverage fridges generally don't require bending that plate because they come from the factory already vertical and towards the back out of the way. So that could be one way to kind of skip that stressful part of the build.
Hey Josh, it looks like Matt has a question.
Okay, Matt.
Thanks. One of the things that I found that I was a little disappointed with when I bought a mini fridge, it was actually already a kegerator when I bought it. It was designed to be an undermount, under the kitchen countertop or under a bar type of thing. And it's worked fantastic for me, but it was disappointing when I discovered that while it's the 2-tap mini fridge with a tower on it, the insides would hold 2 corny kegs perfectly. But if I went to put 2 Sankey kegs, 5-gallon Sankey kegs in there, it wouldn't fit. So it was designed for corny kegs only. And that's one thing that you might want to double check on, depending on if you ever plan on putting commercial kegs in your kegerator.
Yep. And that's a great point, Matt. Thank you. I didn't really think about that because my intended use was only for corny kegs. But yeah, you definitely want to shop for what the use that you're going to have with it. If you have the possibility of using those kegs, you want to make sure you look for something that can handle it from the get-go, I think. And that might be hard to do in a mini fridge form factor. I'm not real sure.
I mean, if it's something you're going to do and you have those kegs on hand, it would be super clever to bring them with you when you're shopping for kegs and actually put maybe even just 2 of them, so you can put 2 in this way and 2 in this way and see if you can get them to line up and the door to shut properly.
Yeah, that's a great point. Which kind of brings me to the next part of it, is with the door being able to shut. So most of the mini fridges you're going to get, they're going to have shelving on the inner section of the door. And even with like a corny keg, a 5-gallon corny keg, most likely one keg inside of there, that door's not going to shut with the shelving in place. So you most likely will have to remove the door shelving. It is pretty simple to do. In my case, just pull back the door seal, the little rubber door seal on the edges. It revealed some Phillips screw heads. There's, I think, maybe like 14 screws. Pick them out, and then that shelving just kind of pulls right off. So as far as once you get the shelving off, you don't really want to just leave it that way because most likely it's going to just be insulation foam or like cardboard. And so you don't really want that getting moisture or anything built up. So you want to look for like a mildew resistant wall panel or something of the sorts. And what I actually did in my build was I went to Menards and they have a little section in the back wall where they have remnants of stuff. So for $5, we got a 4-foot by 8-foot sheet of mildew resistant wall paneling. Had a little crack at the top corner of it, but considering I only needed that small portion, $5 was a steal. So Look for that if you're looking for deals. Also, if you're going to do something like this soon, I still have most of that 4 by 8 foot section in the garage and don't have a use for it. So I'd be happy to throw it your way. But once you have that, you should be able to reuse that door seal. You're going to drill the same holes in that wall panel in the same places that the shelving had use the shelving as a template for that. And then you can just screw the rubber seal back onto it, mount the door, and good to go. Next slide, please. So this brings us kind of to the scariest part of the build, in my opinion. I was pretty nervous when I went through it, and for good reason. You know, when you go to bend the freezer plate, if something goes wrong, if you break the lines or crack the lines, the fridge really is toast. It's not cost effective to repair it because you're looking at somebody who can weld. You're looking at refilling the Freon and then hoping that works. So it's really, you know, a scary part and something that can ruin the entire building process, but at the same time, it's not something to overly fret about. My suggestion would be to, you know, before you get started with this part of it, is to set back, drink a home brew, maybe 2, you know, calm those nerves a little bit, chill out, and then go for it. In my personal experience, it wasn't as complicated or as scary in the end as I thought it was going to be. You know, use your fingers to brace the refrigerant lines in the back, and then just slowly push down and towards the back with the freezer plate. Go slow, and you're gonna know. Like you know, you kind of get feedback from those refrigerant lines, having your fingers pulling up on them and prying on it while you're pushing down. You can feel if it's gonna start cracking or something. And when I was doing it, like it never felt like I was gonna break anything. So it really wasn't as big a deal as I made it out to be. But I do want to try to put a little bit of scarcity in you at this point, because it is like one of the most important sections to really be careful. So once that's done, that's really like the hardest part of the whole build, I think, in my opinion. But one thing I did have to do on mine that's optional. Most fridges may not have that the case, but I wanted to fit 2 kegs in this fridge, and putting 2 corny kegs in here wouldn't work with the thermostat controls where they were. They were on the right side in the front, kind of blocking that second keg. So I did need to move the thermostat controls. I did have to extend the thermostat wires because they only came out about 4 or 5 inches. Wasn't hard to do. Cotton's has the thermostat line or thermostat wire for like 15 cents a foot. And then I got a couple butt connectors, crimped them on, and everything worked worked great. So it's not something to be scared about either. But if you have to do it, you have a couple options. And then again, on the 2 kegs aspect, at least of this mini fridge, even moving that thermostat control, I didn't really have, like, it was real tight. The 2 kegs would almost fit, but not entirely. And so I decided to cut the shelf molding because I was pretty sure the kegs would fit if I did that. Really easy to do. Took a razor blade, cut through it real quick. It's, real smooth. But you want to be a little careful here too. If those wires from the thermostat are going down, and going through that foam, you could cut through those wires, and then it's not irreplaceable. You can fix that, but it's kind of a pain in the butt. So just go slow, cut it easy with a razor blade, and then remove those. And then I was able to fit 2 Ks after doing that. Next slide. Okay, and then this part, the next thing to do, we're mostly done with this build. We want to get the tower mounted. In this case, I went with the tower. If you could drill through the door as well and do your faucets, and that's probably a little easier. But if you have a tower, that's, I think, the way to go. But you want to be a little careful here too, because those thermostat wires or refrigerant lines or something like that, if you're not sure about the model of fridge you have, they could be in the way of where you want to put your tower. So, choose a location of your tower. Normally it's going to be in the middle towards the back. And I would say drill a pilot hole with a smaller drill bit to start. You may not be able to see wires or anything, but if you do right away, you know, okay, hey, I need to move, and you've not put a big hole in the top of it first. And you know, if the pilot hole went good, drill your 3-inch, take a 3-inch hole saw or 4-inch, depending on the tower you have, and then drill slow. Don't put a lot of pressure on the top of that to start. You don't want to go all the way in, and then if there is, and there does happen to be some wiring that's or some lines cut into it, so just go slow. You'll knock through that first layer of the metal, pull that out, and then you can use like a screwdriver or a razor blade or something to kind of pull away the inner foam, and then see if there's anything you need to move. Like the wires, you can just kind of move out of the way, but the refrigerant lines, you're not going to probably be able to move them. If there's nothing in the way, you can cut all the way through or drill all the way through with your pilot bit first, and then come in from the other side, from the underneath, inside of the fridge to drill with your hole saw in, just to keep that a clean cut on the inside as well. So once you've got that hole cut all the way through and it's clean, really all that's left is mounting the tower and then running your line. And so as far as mounting the tower, you either want to use the tower itself as a template to drill the 3 or 4 screw holes that are going to go through the top, or if you have a gasket that came with your tower, it'll have the holes, and it's a little bit easier to use as a template. But either way, you'll drill those 3 holes, mount it with the screws and bolts, and it's cake on that part of it. You know, once you got that far, that's super easy. And then it's just a matter of hooking up your lines to the keg, and you know, your faucets, which I didn't really cover. You know, that part of it. You know, I guess I was hoping that your tower would already be assembled, and maybe if we do a seminar later with faucets, we'll cover a little more of that. But then you're ready to enjoy your hard work and pour yourself a beer. So, and then if you go to the next slide, it'll be the finished how everything works. And I did end up painting the tower and a little bit of the drip tray as well.
Before we get too far away, I did a mini keg conversion just like this too. Mine, so it looks like you have a plastic top. My mini fridge, actually that plastic top was able to peel away or like pop off. So I pulled that plastic top and I carved out the foam on top and sunk a 1/2-inch piece of plywood into the foam, and then used threaded inserts and drilled bits, and then threaded the tower through those threaded inserts into the foam. Because I also got, via Homebrew Talk, the kegerator with the refrigerant lines that run through the roof of the outside body of the fridge. So I dug through the foam manually with fingers to like find where the refrigerant lines were and drilled my holes between the refrigerant lines. That being said, the only other problem I had was the arcing of the tubing off of the keg touching the roof caused the beer to freeze in the line right up where it touched the ceiling of the refrigerant of the fridge. The really expensive all stainless steel ball lock connectors come out at a 90-degree angle, so you don't have that 45-degree arc that makes the tubing touch the fridge. Those were my two like tweaks to what I found on Homebrew Talk myself to do this same type of conversion.
And they might be similar fridges. That plastic piece came out, had a little mini layer of foam, and then it was the metal piece. So that plastic piece is really cosmetic. And so I drilled through the plastic piece, then drilled through the metal. I didn't do you know, the other modifications you made, but yeah, they're probably pretty similar in that. And that's all I had. I think if we have more questions, we can wait till the end of the seminar. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Jake to talk about his experience with the full size.
Okay, thanks, Josh. First of all, let me just say that I am going to do my own mini fridge. I'm going to bend the coolant plate, like you said. I've been avoiding that. So after talking to you, I'm gonna give that a try. I've got one I'm gonna do it with, so fingers crossed. Okay, so full-size fridge conversion, arguably the cheapest, easiest way to go. Um, I mean, I got my fridge for free, and I'd been saving up for it when I ran into it. So I used some of the money that I was saving up to do silly things like external gauges and stuff. So we'll talk about that a little bit, but just some of the pros and cons. It is incredibly simple. If you want to just do a picnic tap and a CO2 bottle inside a beer fridge that you've got in your garage, you can totally do that just to get into kegging. Um, and then the next step, you can drill some holes in it and put taps in it. But for me, the biggest thing was footprint. So mine's in my garage, which can shorten the life of a fridge. But I wanted to have the smallest footprint possible, and this helped me do that. And so now I can still park both cars in the garage and all that. But the other thing is you don't need temp control. Your keezers will generally need some sort of temperature control. The downside is there's less space inside. You're probably only ever going to fit 6 kegs in there. And to Matt's point earlier, absolutely know what size keg you have going in it. And that's probably some of the first steps you should look at is the cubic feet of it. This one's 16 cubic feet. It's, that's pretty small, I think, or standard. Um, and I can squeeze 6 corny kegs, but I cannot fit but maybe 4 any other style kegs. So the other style kegs are shorter and fatter. So I think Travis has a good idea. Later he'll tell you about tracing the keg, and that way you can use that to estimate what you can fit in there. So these are some of the first steps. You always want to look at the layout. You want to look at the floor. Are you going to have to do some modifications to it? Does it work? If you're buying it off Craigslist, make them plug it in, all that good stuff. So anyway, the so let's see what else here. Go ahead and hit me on the next slide, Frank. Okay, so because this is such a simple build generally, I'm probably going to talk more about things that you shouldn't do than that I've learned that you shouldn't do, than how to set up one of these, because it's pretty simple. So the first step is to plan your CO2 supply, what you want to do, plan where you're going to put your manifold, where you're going to put your CO2 cylinder. Do not put your CO2 cylinder on the side. So I talked to what I thought were some experts on this, and they told me I could do this. What will happen is, should you have, let's say you're, burping a keg, or you lose pressure somewhere, you will pump liquid CO2 through your regulator, which will ruin your regulator, and it'll probably blow all your gauges too, if you have any gauges hooked up later. So don't do that. I learned the hard way. I didn't have any pictures of my first build, so I had to put the one where I initially had it on its side. So the let's see. So if you're going to put your CO2 cylinder on the outside, be careful, because the the side walls have the coolant lines in it. You can feel where there are. If you let it run for a while, you can feel the hot spots on the side. So if you target like really towards the very, very back of the fridge on the side, you can put a hole in there without hitting any of those lines. But just go slow and just get through the steel first, and then you can kind of poke around in the insulation to make sure there's nothing in there. This fridge has been through many modifications, and I had to drill through the side because I added a nitrogen system to it, and so the nitrogen tanks on the outside. Should you really want to, well, the other thing I should say is leaks are the worst thing ever. You don't want to, blow through a CO2 bottle in a weekend or something. So Teflon tape everything. You can use like a thread sealant. but I found Teflon tape works really well. It does the job. But if you do decide you want to do gauges, external gauges, um, they're fine. Just know that if you're going to do the high pressure gauge, you have to have a high pressure line, which is it's got the woven stainless on the outside, and it absolutely has to be rated for well over 700 psi. I can't remember what mine was rated for, but generally you try to double whatever you're going to get. Um, and just to be safe. Some regulators, I had a weird one. The first one I started with was reverse threaded on the high pressure side. For some reason, I had to buy a adapter. So if you're going to go through the door with a hole saw, the big one that's a 6-inch hole. That was a little fun to go through the steel with a 6-inch hole saw. Just take it slow. Otherwise, I recommend using a high quality hole saw. The carbide tips go through steel really, really nicely, really smooth without bouncing around and tearing up your fridge. So if you're going to do that, absolutely spend the extra money on the hole saw if you don't already have one. Okay, I think that's it. We'll go to the next slide. So like I mentioned, with this one, I can fit the 6, you can see the 6 kegs in there. You might be able to, if you had a really big upright, you might be able to get more in there. As far as the floor goes, well, first let's talk about the taps. So the taps, really straightforward. I think usually when you buy them, they recommend 1-inch hole. I swear I used 7/8 on mine, but maybe somebody else can, help me out with that. But I'm pretty sure I used 7/8 because 1-inch looked like it was way too big. It's really straightforward, just fit the thickness of the door to the shank length. And you generally want to use 5 foot of beer line to get the right pressure drop. So even though you don't need it to reach from the keg to the door, use 5 foot minimum, generally speaking. You're almost always going to have to modify the floor on these. So I prefer the stair step. Frank made a good point, depending on your line ID. So that's the smaller line ID, which I can't remember off the top of my head. The 3/16, that's what, good one, thanks, Frank. So if you do want to modify the floor, I've seen them where they make it all one level. That makes it really hard to get to the kegs in the back, which is already pretty tough. So a stair step, like you see on the right, is what I did. You can pick up cheap, like plastic. They make these clip together plastic flooring for like garages or something. And then I found a piece of scrap angle that I used for the edge there, and it worked really well. It's still fully functional. I know there's a carboy picture there. It looks like it's fermenting. I don't actually recommend fermenting in your keg fridge. It makes the kegged beer very angry when you do that, because you're raising the temperature in your fridge, and when you do that, it changes the partial pressure in the keg, and it tends to want to foam and do things like that. So you can use wood. Just know that you're probably going to have to replace that pretty often because it's going to pick up condensation and things like that, and it's really impossible to clean. And if you haven't had kegs before, they're all going to leak at some point, even a little bit, no matter how good they are. I see Matt's got a question.
Just a quick comment on that. I did put a wood my upright kegerator, and one of the cool things that I did was I sprayed it with that Flex Seal rubber and sealed it up that way. You could probably seal it with any number of things, but I used that, and that's worked really well because yes, you will get condensation, you will get beer spillage, things like that in there, and then you can just wipe it right up.
That's actually a really good suggestion. So if you do want to use wood, it's easy to work with. Just make sure that it's well sealed. And I think that's that's pretty much it. I see Frank commented on my beer engine. That's what I'm putting together the mini fridge so that I can do 55 degrees proper for the beer engine. So that's happening this weekend.
Yes, is-
That's the beer engine. So yeah, I'd commented on our call, and I had your face. I had that beer engine covered up with the slide presentation on this live stream. So now people know that Jake has a beer engine, and I love it. I think it's hilarious. It's awesome.
It's,
Same time.
so Josh has asked me to do like a talk on it, and I will sometime, but I need to do much more work with it so I know what I'm talking about. But I really like it. I picked it up pretty cheap on eBay. Had to clean the crap out of it. It was totally trash, but um, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of work too, but it's a lot of fun.
could you also share off your pretty mead that's sitting right next to it?
Yeah, I've been too lazy to move that in. I did that at a happy hour the other night. So that is a Tupelo honey mead. When we meet in person for the first time in 2021, I will have a bottle of this sitting on the counter for us to try. It's pretty good. So it's almost a year old now. And cleared up pretty nice.
Awesome. All right. So who's next for the chest freezer part?
I
So
think
we
to-
got Travis who's gonna talk to us a little bit about his process with building a keezer.
Cool.
Yep. I don't have a webcam on the computer I'm doing the audio from, so you guys just get to listen to me. So Frank, if you want to go to
Yeah.
the next slide.
It's up full size. Oh yeah, maybe not. There we go.
Okay. Yeah, so basically the Keezer is just basically a chest freezer that's converted, into a keg freezer, Keezer. And so of course, step one is just picking your freezer. A lot of times you can find them used. I know with the pandemic and everything, freezers were kind of hard to come by, but I think they're coming around again, getting back in stock. So just if you can, my recommendation is plan ahead, know just about how many kegs or taps you'd like to have, and that's going to help determine what size. As Jake mentioned, a tip we used was we traced a corny keg, and I think it was about a 9-inch circle just of cardboard. And I had about 10 of them that I took with me when we went Keezer shopping. And the picture on the right there is actually the one we picked out from Nebraska Furniture Mart, and we just laid them in there. And I figured out, okay, I can fit 10 kegs in here, no problem. This is the one I'm going to go with. So that really helps, just in the fact that you can't always go off just square footage, because Keezers vary on dimensions as far as height, depth, width. So, you could have the exact same square footage Keezer, but only be able to fit 8 kegs or 6 kegs because maybe it's taller than it is wide. So that would be a tip that I would recommend. It definitely helped us out. I'm not sure if someone was trying to talk or if I just heard something. You can go to the next slide, Frank.
I think George was admiring your idea to take cardboard cutouts of the circles to Nebraska Furniture Mart to actually lay them physically in the thing, which is a pretty amazing. I think George was just giving you a good thumbs up.
Okay,
Yes,
perfect.
It's clever.
Well, and you'll get some funny looks from everyone when you're talking about taking the lid off and painting it and all kinds of stuff. They won't even try to sell you on the extended warranty when they hear you're basically gonna rip it apart. So that's always fun. So then step 2 is actually figuring out and building, as mentioned before, the collar. And the reason you want to do a collar is mostly because you don't want to drill into the sidewalls where all the coolant lines are. So what you're going to want to do is remove the lid. Typically, there's just a couple hinges on the back, a couple screws. It's not hard to take the lid off. And then you need to determine the height of the collar you want to use. So use 2x4s, 2x6s, 2x8s, 2x10s. You know, depending on where you want the taps at. The advantage, depending on your keezer setup, of maybe going with like a 2x8 or 2x10 is sometimes if it's tall enough, you can actually get another keg on the compressor hump. So that's something that you guys might be able to do. Um, and then after that, it's just pretty much cutting the lumber into pieces to fit the dimensions of the freezer. We use 3-inch deck screws and wood glue to connect all the to build the frame of the keezer. Just make sure everything's square and flush, not warped. Um, and then once you get that assembled, to actually attach the collar, just lay a thick bead of white or clear silicone around the surface of the freezer, and then place your collar on it. And to get it to stick down, it's we used a couple pieces of spare 2x4 wood with 50-pound buckets of sand just to hold it down, and it also helps keep the wood from kind of warping as it's drying on there. Next slide. So then, if you want to, once the collar's glued down and everything, if you're planning on painting it, now's the time to do it. You want to do that before you drill your holes or start assembling any faucets. Typically, these freezers usually have some kind of clear gloss on them. You'll want to just lightly sand that to knock it off so your paint will adhere. And then after that, it's pretty much just deciding where you want your faucets. We use blue painter's tape, as you can see in the picture in the bottom, to kind of figure out where we wanted our taps to go. And then when you're drilling through, what we did was we would start drilling about 3/4 the way through until it was just poking out the backside. And then we'd flip the drill around and drill from the back to the front. Um, that way it wouldn't split or, cause any, deviations in the wood. Um, so yeah, it's really not too big a deal. It's probably about 30-40 bucks outside of the keezer cost to do a conversion like this. Then it's pretty much just install your faucets, the manifold, beer lines, and anything else you want. So pretty straightforward. And then the final step is just make it your own. Um, the one on the left is the one I have in my garage. We painted our logo on it. We put some casters on the bottom so we can easily move it around. The top right one we helped do for my brother-in-law. He went with a 2x8 so he could get an extra keg on the hump. And then he decided to go with a stain for his collar. And then the lower right one is my father-in-law Mike's keezer, and he went with a Harley Davidson theme. So I know I went pretty fast, but didn't want to take up too much time.
Do you make any effort to insulate your collar?
Yes, that's actually a good question. So as far as insulating the collar, we do paint it. We paint the inside just white to match. It also helps match the inside. But yeah, the paint will help insulate a little bit too. So there's just white paint on the inside of the wood there.
So the answer is really no.
I mean, nothing extra, I guess.
I think that's a good question. I've got some on my keezer build, some foam that I purchased from Home Depot and then covered with like foil tape or whatever. But I'm curious, I don't have a fan circulating in there right now either to keep it cold in all locations. So without that insulation that I added, I'd probably have more moisture problems, I'm guessing. I see on your build you do have a fan in there, so I'm guessing that probably helps with that as well. But.
Yeah, definitely. And I actually installed, not pictured here, but I actually have 2 fans now on either side. That definitely helps just keep air circulating. And I have a smart plug that I can track, how often the keezer kicks on and off. So it doesn't seem like it really gets too warm in there. I'm not losing too much. So.
Just real quick on that note, have you automated that in any way, like with Inkbird or some sort of like thermostat, so not it gets too high? Because they make the humidity sensors as well as temperature.
Yeah, so I haven't done so much as far as automating any kind of like the fans are running all the time. I just have those constantly moving air in there. What have done, and at one point there was a couple more slides, and I think in a future seminar we may go into more of the controllers. But that's a good thing I wanted to mention is with as opposed to the other 2 builds, you will need a temperature controller because you don't want your beer to freeze and you basically bought a freezer. So an Inkbird or Johnson Control or something like that can override is definitely something you will need to do this method. um, but what I've done, just because I did have an issue one time with the Inkbird probe, um, it either the calibration was off or something, but basically I had it 10 degrees off and my beer was getting way too cold, and it got way foamy. So now I bought a smart plug, and actually what I do is kind of run a defrost cycle. So I actually have my keezer turn off from like 10 at night to like 8 in the morning and just kind of let everything warm up just slightly. It usually doesn't get above like 50 degrees in there. And this also helps with any ice buildup or anything that sometimes you can have from the moisture. So
Those are all very cool. Those are very neat.
And
thank you.
Travis, on the note of the other slides, I had kind of put together a lot of content for this before I realized how long it was going to take to get through it. So we have a lot of content, a lot of material kind of ready to go. Going through faucets, shanks, temperature control, regulators, CO2 tanks, your tubing. I mean, a really kind of deep dive into this stuff. So if we do have interest in going farther into this material, definitely reach out on the forums, Facebook. Let us know, because we've got some content ready to deliver to you if you guys are interested in it.
Ryan posted a link to his website about his keezer that he did insulate the collar. So George has an example of an insulated collar if he cares to look for it, which I can also give to George. Do we have any troubleshooting stuff, Josh?
Yeah, I kind of forgot about that slide. So yeah, I mean, we're kind of running out of time, but we can talk, briefly about some of what you might run into with that. And I think the biggest thing maybe that we want to cover here tonight would be, the CO2 leaks and the common causes of that. So if you look at the graphic, that's going to be every possible like scenario or location where you could have a CO2 leak. But I'm going to say that 90% of that I have never dealt with. If I've had a leak with CO2, and I've went through a couple tanks where they just emptied way too quick, and so pretty obvious I had a leak. Most of the time, where my leaks come from is from the keg. So you're looking either at the seal, the O-ring that's around the main lid of the keg, or the O-rings that are on the ball box, or the dip tubes. And those are going to be the main points of your CO2 leak. And the best way to kind of find that on your keg and in any of these locations is to take a spray bottle that's got some Star San solution or soapy water if you don't have access to Star San at the moment, and spray it, you know, fairly heavy in those locations. And if it's leaking CO2 actively, you're going to see bubbles come up. And so that'll help you pinpoint where that is. And then another thing that I've learned to do early on with the lid, the O-ring on the lid for sure, is to take a little bit of keg lube, food safe keg lube, and put it on that seal. And that helps it when you're first closing it up and you're putting CO2 on it. It really helps with the seal and prevent any kind of leaks from that location as well. And then occasionally, I've only had to do it a couple times, but those O-rings go bad. And so it's a good idea to have a handful of O-rings just on hand for when that happens. You can replace them pretty quick.
On that topic, O-rings, yeah. So O-rings come in up to 4 or 5 different colors, and the man's in here, and his recommendation was one day, so you buy different colors, and so each year you change the colors of the O-rings on top of your posts. So if your O-rings are red in 2020, as you clean them, replace them with green ones in 2021, and then replace them with yellow ones in 2022. So you always know that you have about a year life cycle on the O-ring on top, and it's obvious because the color is different.
That's awesome. I've never actually thought about that. I've seen where you have different colors for like your gas dip tube and a different color for the beverage dip tube or whatever.
Yeah,
that's a really cool idea.
A lot of people use red and green because green is G and gas is G. But Fox sells, which I know people here that have Fox accounts. Fox sells red, green, yellow, blue, and black. As far as colors that I know of in O-rings. So if you want to do a yearly cycle of each type, gas and liquid, you can always have like I know I cleaned that and I know I serviced it within the last year, sort of obvious memento right on top of the keg.
Yeah.
Hey,
And
Josh,
then,
do you do all of those things like the seal around your O-ring and all that, and test with soapy water every time you put a keg in your kegerator?
No, that's a great question. I think that's a good idea. That's good practice for me to tell you to do. But no, I do not. I should more often. But I'm pretty confident with my O-rings and stuff. I've got into the practice of just replacing them once a year anyway. Whether they're good or not, it's not a really high expense to just go ahead and swap them out.
Yeah, I'm hesitant to keep mine on gas all the time because if I do, about once a year, I'll go out there and I'll have an empty CO2 tank all of a sudden. And, that's what, $25 or whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, which isn't a lot, but if it's happening frequently, it is, and I mean, it sucks to lose, especially when you just filled, and I've had it happen to me. I just got it filled up. I've maybe went through one keg and it's gone. That sucks. So it's a good idea to every time you're putting one in there, to spray it and double check. But I don't always do it.
Well, that's a great idea. Some of my kegs are older, and I'm sure there's some checks or irregularities around where the rings go. So yeah, I'll be definitely checking mine if I try to put CO2 on it permanently.
And then, real quick, and we can get this done. But the only other thing that we probably could talk about a little bit on quick troubleshooting is you've got your kegerator built, you've got everything hooked up and set up. The CO2's run into it, you're getting foamy pours, and that's super common, especially on your first build. I run into it occasionally, even after having these builds for several years. And the number one thing on a new build that causes it is bad line balancing, and that's one of those things we could talk an hour about, I think, and still not necessarily have it down perfectly. But especially like in my keezer, when I was running traditional 3/16 line, I did 10-foot sections of line, beverage line, to make sure you had enough restriction from the keg to the faucet. And so, and now I'm using Eva barrier line, which is actually a smaller inner diameter. So there's more restrictions. So I'm only doing 5 foot or 5.5 foot of line. So it really just kind of depends on your situation, how much line is appropriate. And we can really, we can talk more about that in a later seminar, but that's something to play around with if you're getting foamy pours. But also what's probably pretty common is that it's overcarbonated. If you got your CO2 pressure just cranked too high on the beer, you're going to get a lot of foam when you go to pour. And so you want to make sure, if you're serving an IPA, I mean, I guess it depends on your restriction again with the line balancing, but I mean, I tend to keep most of my beers at 10 to 12 PSI. And that, that provides the proper pour for my situation. Everybody's situation is going to be a little different. And it's just a matter of playing around with it and getting used to your system to find that sweet spot. Outside of that, warm beer can often, if it's not fully chilled and you're trying to pour from it, can often cause foam. And then outside of that, I would start looking at, clogged dip tubes like Trube or hops or something clogging its path to the faucet.
Yeah, don't get Frank started on that one. Yeah, but for good reason.
You all are lucky I stepped away from the computer for a second.
Yeah, I know.
Anyway, yeah.
Thank you, Josh and Jake and Travis for telling us all about their different Keyser setups and kegerator setups. And now Ryan is up.
Yeah, we can go ahead and roll. Thanks, Frank, getting that slide there. So for those of you here last month, our next member brew tasting will be the spring fruits. We did get 6 volunteers for that. So we have people brewing with strawberry and with apricots. If you didn't get signed up to brew, we can still use your help. Between now and the next month, if you happen to have already cleaned bottles, we'd love to have that. But if you have bottles with easy to remove labels, some of the brands are mentioned there, but Local Free State's a great one for that. Their labels come off really easily. And 6-pack holders are the big thing. It's a lot easier to distribute all these sampling packs to everybody when you don't have to walk away holding 6 individual bottles loose in your hands. We burned through almost all my 6-pack holders last time, so I'm going to donate as many as I can, but I'm not going to have enough to cover everybody this time. So please save and donate some of those, and you can drop those off at Josh or Clint's houses. Just make sure to message to make arrangements.
Speaking of Clint, in our pre-meeting happy hour, I think Clint, correct me if I'm wrong, he got 72 odd empty, clean, unused beer bottles from Free State recently, and he has more on the way. So as a food packing facility, each time a bottle so much as touches the ground, even if it's otherwise completely good, they have to toss it. And so those beers, Clint positioned some trash cans, and they're basically throwing them off into a can for us. He's already collected 70 some odd of them. So point is, don't go out of your way to get beer bottles. Do go out of your way to get 6-pack holders.
Thanks for the update. Yeah, so it sounds like we're good on bottles, or we will be good, because most people who signed up did indicate they had most of the bottles they needed. So it sounds like we should be able to easily close that gap of the remaining, and maybe offer some free bottles to anyone interested with all the extras. But the big thing is those 6-pack holders. So if you're drinking a 6-pack and it's, bottles, save that holder, hold on to it, drop a few off. All right, let's go ahead and move on to that next slide, and unless we have any other comment real quick, but let's get rolling. And so tonight's tasting, we're going to do Irish red ales, as 'tis the season. Go ahead and crack your beer now. You can go ahead and get started. So if you bought some beers, I've got some in front of me here. One of them I bought was the Walnut River Warbeard. That is a commercially available one, and that's in package at your liquor store. There was the Imperial Moorbeard, which is just a stronger version of that. And then the Boulevard Irish Ale. And I mentioned on the forum, there are a few local options that were available in like crowlers or growlers. So hunt those down. I know Free States wasn't available when Lynette checked at the tap house, unfortunately, but they do have an Irish going around. Crimson Fog is available at 23rd Street. Black Stag had an Irish, and the Norsemen are currently featuring an Irish right now. So you got options. And I see lots popping up there on the screen. So I am going to start myself here with drinking the Warbeard from Walnut River. Frank, let's go ahead and hit that next slide there. We can go ahead and talk about the style. So I'm going to kind of introduce the style before we get too crazy on taking notes from folks. So here's some of the vital stats. I'm not going to read everything off on here. If you notice, it's kind of a low, medium bitterness, probably really a low. We'll consider it low bitterness style. Fairly light in color, 9 to 14. And this is low alcohol. Well, relatively. We're not seeing 7, 8, 12% beers here. 3.8 to 5%. Very, very nice. You can have a couple of these and not hurt. Let's go ahead and hit that next slide. Oh, Frank walked away. We'll pause for a second there. He's probably grabbing his beer, but I will talk about some of the appearance characteristics. As you've noticed, if you poured your beer here, it's got amber reddish color. My camera obviously isn't coming out great, but if you're cracking one, that's what you're looking for there. Obviously, with almost all styles, it's a clear style, so you should be able to, in a commercial quality produced sample, see through it. And then the head, in my case, it does match the description there as far as color goes, and it is still somewhat persistent despite pouring a minute ago. When you smell it, you get grain focus. Hops are kind of a side to this. It's predominantly a malt heavy style. I'm kind of hurrying through these because we are going to get to where audience interaction comes. That's going to be an aha slide, so I'm going to keep punching for a minute. Flavor, Frank, we run that slide there. If you're drinking it here, just like with the smell, the malt is definitely the forward aspect to it. Some of the attributes there they're talking with typical to the style. Somewhat of a caramel malt flavor and sweetness, and that's the predominant aspect to it. Let's see. Little no esters. The yeast don't play a lot here. Some beers, if you're not familiar with this aspect, with say a Hefeweizen, you've got that strong yeast aspect. This is a very clean, simple beer to where the yeast is not playing a strong seed in here. And as I mentioned, the balance leans slightly towards the malt. Mouthfeel real fast, moderate carbonation. Some beer styles trend more flat. This has obviously got some pretty good bubbles to it. Smooth, it's a nice clean beer. Let's go ahead and get that AHA slides running, Frank. So let's punch to that one real fast. If you've got your mobile device here, this is where we're going to do some audience input, not just on the tasting, but we're going to also pick up on some of the Keyser discussion we had and talk about, just some of our usual brewing survey questions towards the end. You can go ahead and join using the link there. And if we could copy, thank you, Frank, it's already on it. Use that link there, or you can type it in on your phone. It's a relatively short one. Tried to keep it easy for you. I'm going to go ahead and switch the screen share to mine. It looks like we have 3 people in already, so we're getting in good. All right, share screen. Frank, are you seeing me there? I lost my, okay. All right, so I'm seeing 5 people in so far. All right, yeah, you can go ahead and answer this question here. So as soon as you get in, feel free to say what'd you pick up at the liquor store, and you can give us multiple options here. So in my case, I picked up a few. Let's see, what we found out there. I know I went looking for a couple, and I found it actually surprisingly difficult to find some of these. So I had to go to 2 different liquor stores, and I know, normally where I'm buying my stuff. So I know the selections. I was really disappointed. All right, looks like we've got some of the Walnut Rivers out there, Boulevards out there, Martin City. All right, we've got 7 out of 7 answers. You're welcome to still join in here, folks. So if you did want to participate, there are still more slots available, and there is some interactivity. So, but I am going to go ahead and click on to the next slide just to keep us now talking about the tasting aspect. So go ahead and take another look at it here. You know, we all grab different beers. They're all trying to be an Irish red ale. So obviously they should all follow similar traits, but what do you see when you look at yours here? You know, what color? Did it meet the clarity? I assume all these are good commercial produced beers. They should be very clear. And, you know, aspects of what color head. Mine's kind of an off-white tan color head.
Hey Ryan, I'm getting a participant limit reached on the URL.
Huh.
Here.
I'm only showing 7 out of 15 in the corner, so I'm not sure why that's the case. We haven't had that happen before. That's weird. But while I try to see if I can fix this, feel free to folks talk about some of our color and clarity options there. I'm gonna quick try to see if I can upgrade this midstream. I already upgraded to the 15 count, but it does not look like I can upgrade it again. So that's weird because yeah, now I'm only showing 6 participants. All right. So it looks like we're seeing some of those colors there. I see some red, reddish, garnet. Can't. Geography's mixing with color there. Dark amber. All right. Well, yeah.
For anybody listening, I'm gonna post a new link. This link is more direct, it seems like. So the one that's sort of the specialized link doesn't seem to want to let people in, but this one did let me in. So
is that the just regular AHA slides and you type in the URL?
No, it's just got a random set of whatever extra characters. It's not a vanity URL.
Professional lady.
Oh, I just got kicked out of Zoom.
Walked out.
Real fast, grab that out of the way. All right. Looks like, yeah, people are popping in. So it looks like that worked, Frank. Good work. All right. We'll go ahead and I know we're getting some people answering still. It just joined in, but we've got lots of questions here. So I'm going to go ahead and get to our next one there. When you smell it here, you know, we're doing the same order we did last month when we were drinking the member beers. What's the aroma you're getting here? You know, we talked about the balance and what you should be perceiving, but does yours meet that? And you can still keep taking sample drinks as you do it, you know. All right. So I'm seeing a little bit of graininess possibly, or just perceiving of grain. Same with malt character. Clean fermentation, so I'm perceiving that as an esterless type situation, not getting any unattended side effects there, a lack of maybe diacetyl or yeast esters or stuff like that. Seeing sweetness, a little bit sweet, which it did mention it should finish dry, but that can be still nose perceived a little extra sweet. Anybody else have a note to throw in there? It looks like we had a couple, no hops and not hoppy. All right. Well, our next character here, what about flavor? So same aspects, but not smelling them. What are you tasting? Even though they are closely linked to perceptions. All right. So we are getting some sweetness on your beer. So depends on how well they finished it or how, you know, what your perception, maybe some of those complex malts are. but definitely malt appears to be driving some of the flavor aspects mentioned so far. It's a really good. I do love malty style beers. Well, if I go liquor store on my own, I will just buy IPAs till I'm black and blue in the face. But I do really love malty beer, so I like when I get forced to try styles. Kind of like when I brew, same situation. I stick to brewing certain things, so it's nice to when we have these various tastings, get forced into other stuff. I really do enjoy malty styles. All right. Well, we saw a little bit of earthy hop character. Besides the malty and stuff there, we're seeing some bready mentioned, a little bit of caramel. Okay. Definitely malt forward drives it. We've talked enough. I think I'm not getting any more samples on flavor here, but let's go ahead and talk about brewing since this is the Brewers Guild. Have you brewed an Irish Red before? Or a similar style? Or did this tasting these, maybe you hadn't tasted an Irish Red before, did this get you considering to brew one? I know my brew year's resolution last year was to brew at least 3 new styles I had not done before, and I did hit that despite not getting to submit any of them to contests. I did brew 3 new styles. Looks like quite a few folks, at least answering, have brewed an Irish Red Ale before. That's cool. I am the solo not yet, but very interested. I did a couple malt forward beers last year. So, like I said, I'm branching out, trying to break out of that familiar beaten territory. All right. Yep. Stays predominantly yes. I'll go ahead and it looks like we've got 9 of our 10 because our 10th maybe not answering or maybe my extra window open. All right. And now, thanks to Josh's great kegerator Keyser presentation, do you currently have one? I assume we're probably going to trend pretty heavily, but it is the Brewers Guild. But there are plenty of people that are bottling and or have not maybe done it, but might be inspired to do it. Looks like it was indeed. Again, we got 9. I think I left another tab open here with the. So looks like lots of Keysers out there. So definitely next time we do some build pictures or whatever, feel free to send yours in too.
Before we move too far away from red ales, does there a perception sort of as the beer styles come and go in favor of like the community of like red ales becoming more common here lately? A few years ago, I remember I think it was Mr. Jensen had said something about red ales being terrible in that they're not hoppy enough to be a good IPA, and they're not malty enough to be a good brown beer or porter. And it was kind of the joke, but like at the time, red ales were kind of relegated to the macro brewers and the sort of the things you see on the shelf that you really don't care about. And we all know that those styles come and go, as like saisons is a good example of styles that came out of the depths of nobody wanted to drink it to being a prominent style today.
Yeah, you talk about the macros. Until probably the last 3 to 5 years, if you said red ale, I definitively associate it with Killian's. There wasn't another one in my head that it went to, which at this point, Killian's is done by Coors, if I remember right. But now,
go ahead, Brian.
Oh, what were you gonna say, Josh?
I was just gonna jump in and say that my first craft beer that I probably ever drank and consistently drank was like in 2003 when I moved to San Diego. Carl Strauss's Red Trolley, and it's an Irish red. And I drank that like super consistently. And that's really kind of what got me into more craft stuff.
All right. I did update the brewing question since we made it all the way into 2021. I couldn't keep saying since March, that's kind of was getting passe. And we had too many people saying yes by then. So now we got fresh stats. Have you brewed in 2021? And it looks like surprising number have, despite all the cold we had and everything else. People are getting out and brewing. I'm getting ready to now that it's not so miserable outside, but I have not yet myself. I am one of the no's.
Hey, Ryan, I had a question on the red ales.
Yeah.
Do you think somewhat like IPA has done, where there's been a pretty considerable style creep far as additional hops and all that. Do you find that, or do you think that with red ales? Because traditional red ale, I'm not particularly fond of, but when I've gotten my hands on an imperial red or something that's been kind of jacked up a little higher, I start to like it again. Anybody's opinion on that? I'm just curious.
So I've only of recent done Irish Reds. I've had a couple of red IPAs before, but I didn't, have them as part of doing this. So, but I haven't seen many commercial examples of them. Frankly, it was hard to find Irish Reds, relatively hard. I wouldn't say hard, but I can go pull 30 IPAs off the liquor store shelf. It took me 2 different liquor stores to get 2 different red Irishes. So
I think to your
Boulevard came out with a large format. I can't remember the name of it, but it's a double red, imperial red, and I find it quite delicious. But again, it's not really fitting the style. It's more almost like a barley wine light.
I think to your point, Dale, I got 23rd Street Crimson Fog, which is an award-winning, has won a medal before recipe, but they label the can at 6.1% ABV, which is a style that caps at 5. So yeah, it might be starting to creep into territory of more of something makes it a little bit better.
Were you thinking of Worth the Wait, Dale?
I'm sorry.
Boulevard's Worth the Wait.
Yes,
Was that it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think it did very well on Untapped, but I don't know. It really suits me well.
Yeah, I'm kind of done with Untapped. I mean, as far as letting that determine what kind of styles are made, I wish I had, um, I wish the vocal minority that is Untapped would stop driving the industry a little bit, because I mean, there's the vast majority of people still like classic styles, but if all you listen to is Untapped, all every brewery would ever make would be hazy IPAs and imperial stouts. So
Matt, when can we expect your Glitter Brute IPA to hit shelves?
On that subject, though, I do have some news, guys, and I didn't want to make this a part of the meeting or anything, but I am no longer at City Barrel. There's been some, I think COVID was a big stress on a lot of it, but mostly, they had me working in crazy hours, and the pay just wasn't there, and I ended up training my replacement. So they're still going to make some great beer, and I have no ill will or any hard feelings, but I decided to get back into just doing what I want to do. I kind of miss being self-employed. So, part of it is, I don't know, maybe I'm aging out a little bit. I just decided didn't want to keep breaking myself every day. But yeah, I'm excited to be maybe even doing some homebrew again, and so hopefully see you guys at some meetings soon.
Yeah, welcome back to the homebrew fold, I guess would be the transition.
Oh, hey, it's as far as I'm concerned, it's not a transition. It's just it's a return to brewing for me.
Yeah. Return to roots. All right, so I threw a question up there. It looks like a lot of people are unsure about the AHA Big Brew Day. I've got one more question left, and then we can go ahead and wrap up. Last one, just one more survey there. Virtual meetings. We've had some good ideas. We've implemented some of them. We're doing some of the virtual tasting now. We've done some of the member brews. We got another member brew cooking. Brainstorm, though, with the group. 100 minds are better than 2. So if you have some new, fresh ideas, please throw them out there.
Yes, please.
But otherwise, as far as Frank, this was my last slide effort, so you can play out whenever you would like there. But Less Frank, apparently more hot tub. Ouch. Got some burns out there.
Nobody hurt my
Hey, at
feelings.
least-
I typed that myself.
Okay. I'm just glad. I was going to say, I'm just glad, or maybe I wish someone said less Ryan. I'm not sure. All right. But yeah, Frank, just let us know when you kill it.
Yeah, just go ahead and transition away from screen sharing.
Oh, yep. I will do that real fast.
We will, peek at my desktop.
Right.
Yeah, there you go. That's all Lynette.
Cool. Yay. Well, that is our meeting for this month. You are welcome to hang out in the Zoom meeting after we end the feed and discuss the beer in more detail should you choose, or whatever you want to talk about. So, thank you.
All right.
Good. We could say.
We all went into Kitty McGee's for we're a jolly crew. We all went into Kitty McGee's to have a drink or two. Kitty McGee's in Dublin town upon the crawl. A hell of a time was had by all down where the beer and whiskey flew. We all went in O'Haggerty's pub for we're a jolly crew. We all went in O'Haggerty's just to have a drink or two. O'Haggerty's, Kitty McGee's in Dublin town upon the crawl. A hell of a time was had by all down where the beer and whiskey flew. We all went in O'Leary's pub for we're a jolly crew. We all went in O'Leary's just to have a drink or two. O'Leary's, O'Haggerty's, Kitty McGee's in Dublin town upon the crawl. A hell of a time was had by all down where the beer and whiskey flew. We all went in McCleary's pub for we're a jolly crew. We all went in McCleary's just to have a drink or two. McCleary's, O'Leary's, O'Haggerty's, Kitty McGee's in Dublin town upon the crawl. A hell of a time was had by all down where the beer and whiskey flew. We all went in McMillan's pub for we're a jolly crew. We all went in McMillan's just to have a drink or two. McMillan's, McCleary's, O'Leary's, O'Haggerty's, Kitty McGee's in Dublin town upon the crawl. A hell of a time was had by all down where the beer and whiskey flew. We all went into Dylan's pub for we're a jolly crew. We all went into Dylan's just to have a drink or two. Dylan's, McQuillan's, McCleary's, O'Leary's, O'Haggerty's, Kitty McGee's in Dublin town upon the crawl. A hell of a time was had by all down where the beer and whiskey flew. We all went into Cafferty's pub for we're a jolly crew. We all went into Cafferty's just to have a drink or two. Cafferty's, Dylan's, McQuillan's, McCleary's, O'Leary's, O'Haggerty's, Kitty McGee's in Dublin town upon the crawl. A hell of a time was had by all down where the beer and whiskey flew. We all went into Rafferty's pub for we're a jolly crew. We all went into Rafferty's just to have a drink or two. Rafferty's, Cafferty's, Dylan's, McQuillan's, McCleary's, O'Leary's, O'Haggerty's, Kitty McGee's in Dublin town upon the crawl. A hell of a time was had by all down where the beer and whiskey flew. We all went into Gilligan's pub for we're a jolly crew. We all went into Gilligan's just to have a drink or two. Gilligan's, Rafferty's, Cafferty's, Dylan's, McQuillan's, McCleary's, O'Leary's, O'Haggerty's, Kitty McGee's in Dublin town upon the crawl. A hell of a time was had by all down where the beer and whiskey flew. We all went into Milligan's pub for we're a jolly crew. We all went into Milligan's just to have a drink or two. Milligan's, Gilligan's, Rafferty's, Cafferty's, Dylan's, McQuillan's, McCleary's, O'Leary's, O'Haggerty's, Kitty McGee's in Dublin town upon the crawl. A hell of a time was had by all down where the beer and whiskey flew. We all went into Flanagan's pub for we're a jolly crew. We all went into Flanagan's just to have a drink or two. Flanagan's, Milligan's, Gilligan's, Rafferty's, Cafferty's, Dylan's, McQuillan's, McCleary's, O'Leary's, O'Haggerty's, Kitty McGee's in Dublin town upon the crawl. A hell of a time was had by all down where the beer and whiskey flew. We all went into Lanigan's pub for we're a jolly crew. We all went into Lanigan's for a final drink or two. Lanigan's, Flanagan's,
Gilligans, Milligans, Gilligans, Raffertys, Caffertys, Dillas, McQuillans, McClearys, O'Learys, O'Haggertys, Kitty McGee's, and Dublin town upon the Crow. A hell of a time was had by all, down where the beer and whiskey flew.
I was born on the Dublin street where the Lyle drums the beat and the loving English feet that walked all over us. And every single night when we down would come home tight, he'd invite the neighbours out with this chorus.
Come out, shibboleth's hands, come out and fight me like a man. Show your wife how you won medals down in Flanders. How the IRA made you run like Galloway from the green and lovely lanes of Killishanco.
Come tell us how you slew them old Arabs 2 by 2. Like the Zulus, they had spears, a bow and arrows. How bravely you faced one, with your 16-pounder gun, and you frightened them damn natives to the marrow.
Come out, shibboleth's hands, come out and fight me like a man. Show your wife how you won medals down in Flanders. How the IRA made you run like Galloway from the green and lovely lanes of Killishanco.
Come let us hear you tell how you slandered great Parnell when you taught them well and truly persecuted. What are the sneers and jeers that you loudly let us hear when our leaders of 16 were executed?
Come out, shibboleth's hands, come out and fight me like a man. Show your wife how you won medals down in Flanders. How the IRA made you run like Galloway from the green and lovely lanes of Killishanco. Come out, shibboleth's hands, come out and fight me like a man. Show your wife how you won medals down in Flanders. How the IRA made you run like Galloway from the green and lovely lanes of